Episode 76.2, Settlement 2. The next morning, Jude and Cordelia left the basin after being sent off by gentle snow breeze, and the two headed towards Raptor Canyon. However, the facial expressions of the two were different. Jude's face was glowing with a smile, and Cordelia kept looking at him with an awkward face. Hoo-hoo. Cordelia flinched when Jude began to unusually hum. And she studied Jude's face again. Why is he so excited? Why is he broadly smiling? Anyway, shouldn't I behave like nothing happened at that time? That's right, let's pretend that I don't remember. Having made up her mind, Cordelia cleared her throat and made a cool and dignified expression as if she had not done something shameful, and Jude had a wicked smile and said in a low voice, "Licks lick." Cordelia's face turned red. But Cordelia didn't give up yet. What nonsense are you suddenly saying? Licks lick. You be asterisk starred, you wretched be asterisk starred. Cordelia eventually gave up and began slapping Jude on the back, and Jude just smiled in satisfaction. Hey, it no longer hurts when I hit you. Have you been lying so far that it doesn't hurt? No, it hurts a lot. Ouch, it hurts. Ouch, it hurts. I hate you so much. Cordelia, whose neck had turned red too, began to increase the strength in her hands. Hey, it hurts, it really hurts. It doesn't hurt. No, you're wrong, it really hurts. Okay, your level is high too, right? Though it may be less than the martial artist Jude, the wizard Cordelia also had her physical abilities increased every time she leveled up. As Jude frantically cried, Cordelia asked after reflexively stopping her hand, "Does it really hurt?" It really hurts. That's great. Hey. Maury be more hurt. Licks lick. Hey, it doesn't hurt, you're not actually hurt, huh? It hurts but still lick. Die. A few minutes passed since the violence and relentless teasing between the two began. Cordelia panted after getting tired, and Jude said, "It's all right because it was very cute. F asterisk seeking B asterisk starred, I'll reconsider using beast mode again." Cordelia glared at Jude and decided to change the topic instead of hitting Jude more. Anyway, are we going to Raptor Canyon now? Yes, because it seems that there's a relation between Lena and the elves' magic kingdom, which is said to be in Raptor Canyon. The ruins of the magic kingdom, there must be a lot of rare items, right? Tusk, you're greedy for everything. Die. As Cordelia glared at Jude again, Jude cheerfully smiled and said, "Well, I'm looking forward to it too. It's a magic kingdom, so there'll be a lot of stuff that you can use. Moonlight is still worth using, so I hope that there would be a lot of other things, like armor or accessories. Since you're using the witch's magic, wouldn't it be nice to have items that speed up your mana recovery? Yes, I must completely raise my mana itself. It's good that the witch's magic is strong, but it consumes a lot of mana." After she said that, Cordelia suddenly stopped and looked back at Jude. "Come to think of it, did you absorb the essence of the blue moon well?" "I absorbed it well." "For real, then did you open the third door? Are you stronger now?" Cordelia asked as she walked up to Jude with her eyes shining. Jude replied as he impulsively pinched Cordelia's cheeks. "I opened it." Cordelia would have usually called him crazy and asked why he was pinching, but this time, her eyes got bigger and she widely smiled. "Wow, the third door, how did it go? Has something changed? Did you learn some new skills or something?" "Should I show it?" "Yes, show it to me, I want to see it, I want to experience it." As she jumped in place with the rabbit ears headband on her head, Jude smiled again at the sight of such Cordelia, before he suddenly hugged Cordelia on her waist with just one arm. "I'll show it to you." It was not only the Black Dragon release technique that he learned. 24 Gale Steps also received a new change. 9th Heaven's 9 doors. 9 worlds and 9 doors. It was the special martial arts of the transcendent being who defeated the overlords of hell when they came down to this world in the past. 24 Gale Steps, Black Wind's Advent. Jude said in a low voice before he carried Cordelia with both hands, Cordelia clung to him as he stirred up the wind. Dozens of golden-colored whirlwinds rose. And in between that, a jet-black wind soared up too. Kaya. Jude laughed at Cordelia's scream that was a beat late. He unhesitatingly stepped forward and became the wind itself. Shower. Instead of a deafening roar, what was heard was the sound of something piercing the air. The jet-black wind that was surrounded by the golden whirlwinds blew. It became a gale as it crossed over the white snowfield. At the time when Jude and Cordelia were headed for Raptor Canyon, Gar-El and Adelia were facing red wind. So you mean that Cordelia bought you? Yes, Cordelia and I bought me, to save me at the auction house. Though her fluency in the continent's official language was poor, Red Wind expressed her admiration for Cordelia with great enthusiasm. Gar-El asked after listening to her story. By the way, Miss Red Wind, did you happen to hear where Jude and Cordelia got the money? Although Gar-El had never been involved in the slave trade, he at least had some knowledge of it. As the heir to one of the 12 northern families, he understood how the world works to some degree. Red Wind inherited the blood of the Winter Elves, so she was a very beautiful girl, which meant that her price was likely higher than usual due to the nature of the Lankabust slave auction house. But Jude and Cordelia bought her in a normal transaction. At Gar-El's question, Adelia also had a curious expression. Come to think of it, you're right, it's not something they can do from just their pocket money. In addition, when they looked back on Jude and Cordelia's journey, the two had constantly spent a lot of money. So they were curious on where the two got the money to buy an expensive slave. Cordelia and I said, she gambled. Gambled? You mean the casino? Right, it was called casino. They made money there and bought me. Judoppa said they went to the casino to earn money to buy me. As Red Wind broadly smiled, Gar-El and Adelia looked at each other, and soon anger rose on Adelia's face. He was a gambler. Did they just go to the casino because he wanted to, or did they go to earn money to buy slaves? It was one of the two. Either he is too pure and honest, or he is a gambling addict. It seems they somehow won though. Adelia's eyes narrowed when Gar-El cleared his throat and spoke. And Red Wind said again. Right, Cordelia and I said she won a lot, and I boasted that she was good at gambling. Wait, Lady Cordelia won. Anai is very good at gambling, she said that she'll take me later. Gar-El's gaze went back to Adelia at the innocent remarks of Red Wind, and Adelia flinched before she said, as she cleared her throat. She must be lucky, I guess, that's it. I see. In any case, it was good that they made a lot of money and saved Red Wind, instead of squandering their fortune in vain. Miss Red Wind, can I ask you to continue your story? Okay, I'll continue. Red Wind also talked about the things that had happened after crossing the border. The Ghost Blade Camel. I didn't expect Jude to be Landius' disciple. It was an unexpected appearance of important figures. The Ghostblade Camel and Landius, the Iron Man. The two were undeniably the continent's top swordsmen. I'm sorry, I didn't really understand what they talked about with that person named Camel. No, this is enough, thanks for telling us. When Gar-El brightly smiled, Red Wind unconsciously blushed and giggled as she left the room, and Adelia spoke after she cleared her throat due to some unexplainable discomfort that she felt. It certainly doesn't seem like normal. Yes, I don't think it's just a matter of being involved with demon followers. Them crossing the border seems to be due to an important mission rather than an elopement. Perhaps, I don't know if we should also change the purpose of our trip. They also had to help the two solve the current problem, in addition to recovering the immature runaway couple. Hug Cordelia. Adelia bit her lips and let out a troubled voice. It would have been better if they had just run away. According to what they had heard, Cordelia was running towards an even greater danger. Don't be so worried, we'll be able to join the two soon. Yes, you're right, thank you Lord Gar-El. I'm thankful that Lord Gar-El is here. I'm also thankful that Lady Adelia is here. Gar-El and Adelia stared at each other. If Violent Avalanche was here, it would have a truly uncomfortable expression at the two staring at each other. It was Adelia who turned her head away first. Ahem, ahem. Anyway, I think we shouldn't delay ourselves. Let's start heading towards the gentle Snow Breeze tribe. Okay, I think that's a good idea. Gar-El casually smiled and stood up from his seat before he held out his hand to Adelia. Let's go. Yes, Lord Gar-El. Adelia held Gar-El's hand and stood up as she wondered why he was being modest than usual, and as they were leaving the room, she suddenly stopped walking, because there was something else that came to her mind. That, by the way, Lord Gar-El. Yes, Lady Adelia. That Lord Gar-El doesn't do anything like gambling, right? Yes, I don't. That, Lady Adelia, you don't too, right? Yes, me too. That's good. Yes, that's good. It was relevant to them that the other was a virtuous person. Anyway, the two were relieved by the fact that neither side gambled, and they went out of the room with a small smile on their faces. Episode 77.1 Unexpected Encounter. Terms used in this chapter: female sage, also known as Taoist fairy, female immortal, and angel fairy, but in the Korean traditional style. I'll use female sage to differentiate it from the fairies and fairy queens of the series. Multi-class, it means having multiple classes or jobs in games. Gar-El and Adelia tried to leave for the gentle Snow Breeze village, but things didn't go as planned. Because the terrain of the wild lands could be compared with the vast ocean. Even if there's a map, outsiders are likely to get lost. Please wait a little longer. I will send messengers to the gentle Snow Breeze tribe, so go with them, yes. Violent Avalanche said, tapping its stomach as it leaned its body in a comfortable-looking leather chair. Next to Violent Avalanche was Red Gale, the chieftain of the Great Storm tribe. Jude and Cordelia, our benefactors and friends, you, their brothers and sisters, are also our friends, so we'll help, but wait. When Red Gale awkwardly spoke in the continent's language, Adelia frowned and looked back at Gar-El, and he appeased Adelia with a smile as they couldn't help it. Red Gale, can you tell us when the messengers will leave? Tomorrow morning. I understand, we will wait until tomorrow morning then. Thank you for your understanding. Gar-El responded with a smile to Red Gale before he left with Adelia, who still had a slightly dissatisfied expression on her face. Lord Gar-El, would it be all right? I'm also very worried, but one way or another, this is the land of the barbarians. We know little of this place, so it would be nice to receive their help. We'll arrive there sooner if we are with them. It would be nice if we could leave this afternoon. They're already doing us a favor. At this point, it would be better if we concede and let them be. Gar-El gently spoke again, and Adelia nodded her head. It was quite strange. If her aide, Oron, or her fellow Magic Corps head, Katten, had said something like that, she would have opposed it. But when Gar-El spoke, she felt like following him. For now, let's go to our tent and relieve our fatigue from travel. You've been through a lot, haven't you? I'll brew you some tea that's good for recovery from fatigue. Yes, Lord Gar-El. Adelia replied with a broad smile unconsciously, but was soon embarrassed, and Gar-El, who saw Adelia's bright smile for the first time, was also embarrassed. What's wrong with me? Bowed Typhel. And then, Violent Avalanche clicked its tongue after it saw Gar-El and Adelia came to a halt outside the door because of their embarrassment. They're just alike, they're similar. Violent Avalanche clicked its tongue again as it remembered the crazy couple. The siblings resembled each other as Violent Avalanche expected. In a place where the white snowfield spread out endlessly. Cordelia was sending Jude a gaze that resembled Violent Avalanche rather than Adelia. Sometimes I don't know if you're smart or stupid. Hoo-hoo. Jude and Cordelia were trudging along the snowfield. Rather than specifically going somewhere, they were moving to find a place to rest for the day. This is really tough, so tough. The reason for her criticism was simple. Because Jude, who used the Black Wind's advent while carrying Cordelia, was too excited. As he focused only on running, they went off their initial route for a long time, and their problem now was that they weren't sure how far off they were from the original route. Even if he had a compass and map, the scale of the map wasn't accurate in the first place, so they couldn't find their way back easily. Fortunately, constellations appeared at night, and how to use the constellations to go to Raptor Canyon was a fact that he learned from the gentle Snow Breeze tribe. If you go straight in the direction of the big axe, you'll eventually find it. It was the teaching of fine snow. But Jude, stop blaming me, please. It's not that, it's just because I suddenly have a question. What is it? When Jude turned around and asked, Cordelia naturally stretched her arms forward. Jude's eyes narrowed at once, since he knew what that posture meant. Hey, you said you have a question. My legs hurt too. My princess, haven't you been walking less on your own feet lately? But I have a daddy who became stronger from leveling up. My princess should be independent too. Until when will you be carried in your daddy's arms? Then Cordelia will be a kangaroo. I'm not even your real dad, but I feel terrible. I suddenly miss father-in-law. TN, Jude is calling Count Chase as father-in-law even if he's still not married to Cordelia. Don't ask me why, that's just how it was written in the series. I'm not sure if Koreans call their future wife's father as father-in-law already if they're still engaged. Anyway, just give me a piggyback ride. Good job getting lost, this is your blunder, right? It is. Then quickly. Jude eventually handed the backpack to Cordelia, and Cordelia carried the backpack before she got on Jude's back. So what are you curious about? When Jude asked as he adjusted Cordelia's position, she grabbed his shoulder and said, Wouldn't it be easier to lift me up if I added a handle here? Hey, were you really curious about something? Yes, I am. First of all, the ninth heaven's 9 doors. You said you saw a female sage. I saw one. It was the woman that he saw in that world in his mind. Jude was able to learn 2 skills from her, the Black Dragon release technique and the Black Wind's advent. Will the female sage appear and teach you new skills whenever you open a door in the future? Perhaps. Good, you finally have a proper skill tech tree, I like it. Unlike Cordelia, whose chosen skill tree lets her instantly learn new magic after leveling up, Jude's growth route had been somewhat vague so far. I feel more certain now. Every time he raised the level of ninth heaven's 9 doors, he would be able to learn new martial arts. His existing martial arts would also be strengthened. But Jude, did Landius not tell you this? Master, maybe he didn't saw her. The female sage. Yes. Why? Because the female sage hates macho men. You don't truly mean that, right? No, is it because of Chinmujich then? Maybe. Ninth Heaven's 9 doors was a divine skill that only those with Chinmujich can fully master it. Therefore, Landius could not fully learn the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors, even though he awakened the power of giants through the ancestral regression technique. He was able to reach the 7th door because he awakened the power of the giants. When he opened the 3rd door at that time, Jude realized it. Even though Jude had Chinmujich, his body needed to be stronger in order to open a new door. That need became higher as new doors were opened, so someone who didn't have Chinmujich would need a far more powerful body in order to learn Ninth Heaven's 9 doors. When I think about it, he's really amazing. It meant that he opened up to the 7th door through force. It had indeed become possible for him because of the support of his tremendous physical abilities. It must be the reason why he talked about muscle loss. Without those colossal muscles, he wouldn't have been able to withstand the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors. Ho, but my Jude has Chinmujich. Good, I like it. Cordelia happily laughed and said as she ruffled Jude's hair. But Jude. Yes. You actually learned Ninth Heaven's 9 doors by chance, right? Because you met Master Landius. Yes. Then, how did you originally intend to be strong? In the original story, Jude learned Count Bayer's martial arts and became an orthodox swordsman. However, Jude had left his house much earlier than the original, so he could only learn a part of Count Bayer's martial arts. Originally. Yes, originally. I was thinking of copying parts of Count Bayer's martial arts and learning Red Gale's martial arts in the barbarian lands. After all, Jude had a heavenly talent for martial arts. It wasn't impossible for him to steal and learn others' martial arts if he was determined to do so. Moreover, Lucas was very friendly with Jude. I was thinking of learning from Red Gale in return for saving Red Wind. What an omnivore. Because I was thinking of learning the king's swordsmanship in the future anyway. In Legend of Heroes 2, this was the ancient swordsmanship that the main character Maximilian inherited. But Jude had changed his mind now. In the last expansion pack, Jude must have eventually learned the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors. However, since I learned the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors much earlier, I no longer have to find it. Moreover, there's Landius and Camille, right? Yin and Yang energies. And a yin-yang body that can incorporate both into one body. He was in a situation where he had learned much from the martial arts side already. If it weren't for the big events where he needed to intervene, such as Lena's rescue and stopping the Angry Bull tribe, Jude would have followed and trained under Landius or Camille. In addition, while developing the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors as a foundation, I was thinking of getting a sub-job too. You want to be a multi-class? Yes, I want to improve my scroll production skills. Although Jude was already good in drawing scrolls or magic circles, it was mostly limited to basic magic. One needed a corresponding magic ability in order to add high-ranking magic spells in scrolls. That's good. You've put enough thought on how to become stronger. Nuna is very happy that her Jude is growing well. Cordelia patted and stroked Jude's hair, and Jude quietly accepted her stroking. Because it felt strangely good. The two talked for a long time like that. When Jude and Cordelia reached the top of the hill, they both looked at the same place. A man dressed in white clothes was running like crazy on the white snowfield. It was a place where there were no people in the first place, so instead of crying for help, he was just screaming. And right behind that man, a giant monster was running on the snow, making the ground shake with its every step. Wow, is that a white giant bear? So that's what it looks like before it was corrupted. It's bigger than I thought, though. It looked to be around 6 meters tall. I suppose we'll have to save him, right? Because we don't refuse quests. Cordelia jumped down from behind Jude's back, and Jude stretched out his waist and slightly loosened the muscles of his hands and feet. He runs well. You're right. Despite his short limbs, the man who was running away was quite a few feet away, or rather, he was really fast. That was why Jude and Cordelia didn't rush right in. But don't you think we've seen him somewhere? He has short limbs but is incredibly fast. Dwarf. Black beard and bald head. His hat flew away. The running man's hat flew away, and they were able to see his bald head shining under the sun. Maybe it's him. Indiana Kaplan. An adventurer and archaeologist of the Argon Empire. A man whose bad luck is strong, troublemaker, one who attracts misfortune. He was a great man who had explored numerous ruins and had brilliant achievements, but he was also a man who was always in trouble, just like his nickname. Because of this, he was one of the NPCs that the beginners of Legend of Heroes 2 should avoid meeting once. But not for the Rotten Waters Jude and Cordelia. On the contrary, he was a very welcome figure. So he was here at this point. Then, wouldn't he still live if we didn't save him here? I'm not sure about that. Anyway, let's save him. He's really going to be killed at this rate. Cordelia let down the backpack, and Jude kicked the ground. He immediately cried out to Cordelia, who caught up with him using haste, magic. I'll show you something good. T. However, Jude saw that Cordelia's eyes were twinkling in anticipation. Moreover, there were still new skills that Jude had not shown to Cordelia. Take care of Kaplan. Okay. Jude and Cordelia moved as swift as an arrow. As they passed through the snowfield with a strong whirlwind, Kaplan and the white giant bear, who were in a breathless chase, turned to the two. Who? Jude exhaled. At that moment, he spurred on the ground and used the black wind's advent, and the black wind's swirling motion blocked white giant bear's view. Kyuzuwa. The white giant bear, who was chasing Kaplan on all fours, jumped up and roared. However, it couldn't see Jude despite widening its view. The monster was wondering what had happened. The white giant bear hurriedly looked around. At that very moment, Cordelia grabbed Kaplan's arm and looked up at the sky with an exclamation. Oh! The black wind soared into the sky. In a place that was over a dozen meters away, Jude landed on the ground, and he stretched out his hand towards the white giant bear, thereby releasing it from his hand. A dragon's roar shook the air around them. Roar! The black dragon's force was released. With its mouth wide open as if it were a real dragon, it charged and swallowed the head of the white giant bear. Boodooim! The white giant bear collapsed with a loud noise. However, the black dragon's power did not stop. It didn't stop crushing the monster as it shook the ground. The snow that were within a dozen-meter radius were scattered at once by the intense airwaves, exposing the ground. Wow! At the time when Cordelia admired its earth-shattering power, Kaplan opened his mouth in surprise. Jude landed on the chest of the fainted white giant bear. As it was the first time he used his new skill, it consumed more than half of his inner Kai due to him excessively allocating power to it, but he was satisfied with the result. What do you think? At Jude's question, Cordelia replied with applause. But the time for the two to enjoy it was too short, because the ground suddenly began shaking, despite the fact that the black dragon release technique had already ended. Jude! Kaplan! Jude said, and Cordelia's eyes widely opened. Troublemaker Kaplan. A man of bad luck who makes a bolt of lightning fall, even when the sky is clear. F***CK. At the end of Cordelia's swearing, the ground collapsed. They all began to fall down. Chapter 77.2. Cordelia. I leave Kaplan to you. They didn't realize it because of the snow, but the place where they were standing was actually a gap between the cliffs of the canyon. Cordelia hurriedly grabbed Kaplan and used fly magic to reduce their falling speed, while Jude kicked the debris as he created a whirlwind. Jude! Don't worry. Golden whirlwinds spun around Jude, and he used the whirlwinds to reduce his falling speed, as well as kicking the vertical sides of the canyon several times to prevent himself from falling vertically. It was obviously not easy. 24 gale steps was a footwork technique that could also be used as a fighting skill, but it wasn't a flying skill that could be used to travel through the sky. Jude focused and concentrated again. At the same time that he created new whirlwinds, he read the direction of the wind between the cliffs. While riding on the wind, he estimated in his mind the trajectory of his fall. He kicked the sides again. He corrected his trajectory and looked around him. He couldn't see anything, but he felt everything through his senses. It got darker and darker. Then came a sound. The sound of the rubble that had fallen first. It wasn't a splashing sound. It wasn't a booming or breaking sound either. Thud! There was a snowfield below. Though it was quite deep. But it was clear from the sound that the snow was not completely soft. The snow piled up below would have been frozen. Jude! He heard Cordelia's voice once again. Since she was using fly magic, Cordelia was falling at a much more stable pace than Jude, but Kaplan was a problem. Though Cordelia's physical ability had been strengthened because she was above level 40, her arms that were holding Kaplan, who had the weight of 3 adult men, were already sore and exhausted. But she was more worried about Jude rather than her arms or fingers. Jude! Because Cordelia had already landed down, she was able to confirm Jude's location when she looked up. But not for Jude. As he struggled to ride the wind while in the middle of several whirlwinds, he found it hard to check what was below him. Cordelia! Jude shouted again. After he clearly remembered the direction from where he heard Cordelia's voice, he used the wind to guide him to that place. SHWWRR. The strong wind pierced its way in between the canyon's cliffs. Jude finally landed on the ground, and he saw a small and shining light. Jude, are you okay? It was Cordelia. Her small magical flame illuminated the pale-faced Kaplan who was sprawled out beside her. Kaplan seemed to have fainted. What about you? I'm fine. Cordelia breathed out a sigh of relief before she flopped down on the ground. Jude approached Cordelia and looked around. Since they were inside the very deep canyon, the surroundings were dark, and it was abnormally cold. Despite having the fairy's winter protection, the two felt that it was still cold. What about Kaplan? I think he fainted. Jude looked up at the sky again. At his estimate, the height of the cliff seemed to be more than 100 meters. I just made a crack. It was surely Kaplan. The black dragon had certainly destroyed the ground in the end, but Jude and Cordelia considered Kaplan as the cause of this incident. Because in Legend of Heroes 2, Kaplan was frequently linked to such incidents. What do we do now? Is it impossible to go up? Probably. If Cordelia was alone, it would have been possible with fly magic, but it was impossible for her to take both Jude and Kaplan. The wooden board's not here. Wouldn't it be impossible even if it's still here? You're right. Kaplan was too heavy. The wooden board had risen unsteadily, even when there were two people on top of it. Rock climbing, that won't work with Kaplan too. Yeah, it's a little high for me too. Even if Jude had Chinmujic, climbing up a 100 meters canyon without a rope or any other safety device was something he would refrain from doing. So we have no choice but to get out of this canyon. Yes, I think so, though this could probably be good too. Cordelia tilted her head at Jude's words, but soon smiled and said, Is it because of Kaplan? It is because of Kaplan. Kaplan wasn't simply unlucky. He was a man with a strong bad luck. He was a man who always caused accidents, but he also benefited from those accidents. I fell off the cliff and got it by chance, it's the same situation. Jude was actually quoting a trope that is common in martial arts novels. The character gets chased by villains and falls off the cliff. Somewhere under below the cliff, they find a superb martial arts skill book, elixir, etc., and once they learn consume it, their martial arts become stronger. And at this moment, their group really fell off the cliff. Even if this is the wild lands, a canyon like this is uncommon. The direction is also right, so it's highly likely to be connected with Raptor Canyon. Moreover, the Raptor Canyon was home to the ruins of the Magic Kingdom that was built by the ancient elves. Why is Kaplan from the Argon Empire here? Is it because of the ruins of the Magic Kingdom? The two arrived at that conclusion. When it came to ruins exploration, Kaplan was the best in Legend of Heroes 2. Though he had an adventurous side such as always being chased by someone or escaping from traps, he was a real archaeologist. It's amazing his bad luck was real. They couldn't believe that they fell down from a cliff that was hidden under the snow. As Cordelia blinked her eyes and looked down on Kaplan, Jude also shrugged. Well, this is a magical world. There was at least one magical person like this. By the way, we lost our luggage again. Cordelia said with a tearful face. There were new items that they brought when they left the village of the gentle Snow Breeze tribe, but they lost it this time again. But with Kaplan's luggage, it'll work out somehow. Jude said in consolation, and he looked around again before waking up Kaplan. Because it was Kaplan, so he had to look around just in case. Wow, it's real. What? I mean, there's a place where we could take a rest. They saw a small cave that had a low entrance, but it looked to be good enough for a place where they could rest. How miraculous. Well then, let's go. Jude and Cordelia grabbed each of Kaplan's legs and arms and trudged towards the cave. Once they arrived, they let out voices of admiration again. Wow, for real. How is this even possible? Because when they saw it up close, it was not a natural cave but an artificial one. Although it was worn out by the long passage of time, they were able to ascertain that the words inscribed in the cave was the ancient elf language. I think we must be really near the Raptor Canyon. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain why inscriptions of the ancient elves suddenly appeared in the canyon. Cordelia stared at the fainted Kaplan's face as if he was really amazing, while Jude frowned as he tried to interpret the ancient elf language. It wasn't because he didn't know how to read the ancient elf language, but rather, the erosion was so severe that it was difficult to recognize the letters. A few seconds passed by like that. This time it was Jude who let out an astounded voice. What on earth? Why is it a treasure trove? No, it was just so out of the blue. No, is there anything more unexpected than this? What the hell is it? Hot spring. Hey, hot spring. Cordelia blinked her eyes as Jude repeated what he said, and soon she let go of Kaplan's hands that she was holding and then shouted. Hot spring. Yes, hot spring. By the way, Kaplan's head fell off first. Fortunately, Kaplan was not hurt because of the piled-up snow. Cordelia slightly stooped and carried Kaplan by the arms again before she asked Jude. Really, it's really a hot spring. Does it say hot spring? Yes, perhaps there's something like an underground water vein here. Is it still there? It should still work. It still works, right? I don't know. Suppose that it doesn't work. Isn't having a bathtub more important? You're right. If it's a hot spring, there'll be a place where you can put water. You can pour water and then boil it. Woo-wah hot spring, bath. I'll be bathing after an incredibly long time. Cordelia had not been able to take a proper bath since coming to the wild lands. She had sweat a lot these days, so rather than a treasure trove, a hot spring was more welcome to her right now. He's really lucky, so lucky. Cordelia giggled as she looked at Kaplan with affection. If Jude left her alone, it seemed like she would even kiss Kaplan's head. Because of that, Jude hastily opened his mouth. Anyway, let's quickly go in. Yes. Cordelia brightly answered as she hummed and entered the cave, and soon the two marveled at the place again. It's real. It's a real bathhouse. There were a lot of places that were worn down or broken after a long time, but the inside of the cave, which was much wider than expected, was a bathhouse itself. There were large bathtubs made of stone that were in between several pillars. What was more surprising was the fact that the hot spring water was still surging. Hoo-hoo-hoo's hair. Cordelia. I love it, I'm so happy. Cordelia said as she shed emotional tears before she laid down Kaplan on a flat floor and then looked at Jude. I'll wash first. Oh, okay. Because taking a bath was important. Jude searched around and found some things to burn, so he set it on fire, while Cordelia took a seat in front of the stone bath that was deep inside the bathhouse. Thank you, just thank you. After Cordelia finished praying to someone unknown, she checked the water quality and the temperature first. She wasn't that sure, but it seemed to her that the water was quite clear, and the temperature was just right. No, this was enough for her to believe that someone was responsible for this. Kaplan is the best, thank you so much. Cordelia held her hands together in prayer, and afterwards she immediately began to take off her clothes. As he was standing guard, Jude flinched when he heard the sound of her taking off her clothes, but Cordelia only had the bath in her mind. She didn't hear Jude suddenly chanting Buddhist scriptures and sutras. Thank you. She expressed her gratitude again and then got in. She had only dipped the tip of her foot, but she felt like a shiver ran up her spine. Cordelia slowly entered into the water and soon dipped her whole body into the bath. The depth was just right, so when she crouched, only her neck and head were out of the water. Hello. How long has it been since I've taken a bath? It's not that she didn't wash herself properly with a wet towel or put up with it when she sweated or not, but it really had been a long time since she had a proper bath. Along with the hot steam, happiness spread all over Cordelia's face, and her lips naturally opened wide. She began to sing a heartfelt song like a whisper. Twinkle, twinkle little star Tilda, shining beautifully Tilda. She couldn't stop smiling, her whole body seemed to melt. And at that very moment, wow, look at her, she's very pretty. Really pretty. What, who came to our bathhouse? Wow, so pretty, respect. TN, respect here is pronounced as respect in Korean too. Its meaning, though, has nothing to do with the English definition of respect. In Korean, its meaning is more of good job, or you did great. So the person saying respect here is more like saying that Cordelia did a good job looking pretty or something. It was a story pattern that she heard somewhere before. When she thought about it, she was familiar with the situation itself. Baths. Song. The most beautiful girl. Hey, won't you play with us? That's right, play with us. If it's her, she can play in the night banquet. At the sound of their chattering, Cordelia opened her eyes and saw them. There were tiny and pretty fairies with animal ears on their heads, as well as tails on their backs, like that of dogs and cats. They were the wild fairies, one of the 8 great fairies. Episode 78, Wild Black Cow 1. Terms used in this chapter. Graduation item, a Korean gaming slang that refers to the very best of the top-tier items. If you collect this item, you might as well graduate or stop collecting other items of the same type, since it is the very best item of its type already. Nothing else can surpass it. There were various types of fairies in Pleiades, but in general, they could be classified into 8 types. These were the seasonal fairies that symbolized the 4 seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter, and the 4 types of elemental fairies that symbolized the elements of Feng Shui. Feng Shui actually has 5 elements, not 4, which are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. The wild fairies belonged to the elemental fairies, and they had the power of earth, which symbolized vitality. These were the seasonal fairies that symbolized the 4 seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter, and the 4 types of elemental fairies that symbolized the elements of Feng Shui. In terms of physical ability, they're the strongest among the fairies, I think. However, they were still fairies. What are you thinking about? Your skin is so pretty, can I touch it? I can, okay, I'll touch it. Me too. Seeing them behave as they pleased, they were undoubtedly fairies. Cordelia then thought as she watched the fairies nuzzle her cheeks and shoulders. Why did they appear here? Though it made sense for wild fairies to appear in the wild lands. It is a fact that fairies are scattered everywhere. In order to meet the wild fairies in Legend of Heroes 2, originally, one had to go to the border between the Argon Empire and the wild land. But like how the Fairy Queen was not a single individual, the wild fairies were also not a single group. It's been a while since I've seen a pretty girl. That's right, except for us, only animals live here. How's the bathhouse, do you like it? We managed it. As the fairies began to chatter, the tranquil bathhouse quickly became noisy. Jude, who was trying to act natural and not pay attention to her as much as possible, also heard the voices. Cordelia, are you okay? What's the matter? Ace, oh well. It was when Cordelia's words trailed off in the end. The wild fairies turned their gazes towards Jude and opened their mouths almost simultaneously. Wow, handsome. Who is he? Let's play with him too. Fairy. The last one was Jude. Cordelia said after she deeply sighed as if she eventually gave up. It's the wild fairies. Oh, wild fairies. The reason why Jude's face became bright was simple. The great protection of the 4 seasons could be obtained by collecting all the protections of the 4 types of seasonal fairies. The great protection of the 4 elements could be obtained by collecting all the protections of the 4 types of elemental fairies. And one more. Only those who have collected the great protection of the 4 seasons and the great protection of the 4 elements could obtain one of the 3 strongest protections in the Legend of Heroes series, which is the Fairy King's protection, a protection on the level of fantasy since no one had ever obtained it. As expected of Kaplan, he never thought that they would meet the wild fairies here. It was then that Jude remembered the words of Gentle Snow Breeze. Didn't she say that there were several mysterious races left in Raptor Canyon? Perhaps besides the wild fairies, there were other pleasant surprises waiting for them. Do you know us? Do you want to hang out with us? Let's take a bath together. Should I do that? Are you crazy? When Jude grinned and responded to the fairy's suggestion, Cordelia immediately reacted, and Jude clicked his tongue. It didn't work. Stop saying **t and just cover your eyes with a blindfold. Why a blindfold? Because I will continue to bathe, I just got in the water. Amidst the conversation between Jude and Cordelia, the wild fairies looked at each other and said, Why would he cover his eyes? I've read something like this in a book. Really, was the cover read by any chance? At that moment, Cordelia wanted to refute it, but her opponent was a fairy. Having already experienced how the fall and winter fairies acted, she simply waited instead of protesting, and soon, the blindfolded Jude slowly entered and arrived near the bathtub where Cordelia was in. He's handsome even if his eyes are covered. I like it. While the fairies were admiring Jude's boyish face as if it was an exhibition, Cordelia soaked her head into the water and then resurfaced, before she wiped her entire body and opened her mouth. Fairies, let's play together. Yes, yes, we'll invite you to the night banquet. Also, it's not just that. Not just that. The Queen said so. If you find someone that can help us, bring them. That's right, I remember. Someone who could help. The silent Jude immediately cut in. What do you need help with? Yes, we have an old problem and we can't solve it. The Queen said she'd give a prize to the one who brought someone who will help. Then the prize is mine. It's mine, why is it? As the fairies began bickering and quarreling, a fairy with rabbit ears stealthily approached Cordelia and said, "Let's go quickly while they're fighting, okay? You're just like humans." What do you mean? Cordelia bitterly smiled at the rabbit-eared fairy who asked innocently, and after getting out of the bathtub, she used magic to dry her head and body. I want to wear new clothes. But she had no choice, she didn't have time to launder her clothes. She picked up and wore her clothes that were scattered before she approached Jude, who was sitting on the floor nearby with his eyes blindfolded. You can take it off now. We'll take a bath together. Stop with your lame jokes, you're like an uncle when you keep saying that. Ahem, ahem. Jude cleared his throat before he took off the blindfold and faced the wild fairies. I've heard your story well. Me and Cordelia will come to help you. Please let us meet the Queen. Yes, all right. Let's go. Wait. The last one was Cordelia. When the fairies and Jude looked at Cordelia together, she pointed towards the low entrance. We have to bring Kaplan. Kaplan was stretched out on the floor in a fainted state. There was a possibility that something might happen if they left him as it is. You're right, we need to bring Kaplan. Jude got up from his seat and placed the wild fairies on his shoulder, but as soon as the wild fairies saw Kaplan, they disapproved. We can't do that. That's right, that's unreasonable. Why? He's bold. The other fairies nodded at the words of the rabbit-eared fairy, and Jude was troubled and speechless. Anyway, we can't do that. The wild fairies were quite resolute. Can you make it possible? Aren't you familiar with the fairies? They're impossible to persuade. If it was the Fairy Queen, it would be possible to persuade her, but it was impossible for the fairies themselves, who were completely like kids. After they finished the conversation with their eyes, Jude and Cordelia thought for a moment on what to do before they immediately began to act. What's going on? What's going on? Why are they tying up the bald head? It's called restraint play. Restraint play. Yes, that's what it is. OMG. Why haven't they said anything yet? Do it quickly. Cordelia was tormented by the fairies' conversation, while Jude tied Kaplan tightly with a rope from Kaplan's luggage and laid him down inside the bathhouse. This is our territory, so the animals won't come in. Yes, so that won't work. Jude had also thought of that. He hadn't seen a single animal hair inside the bathhouse. The reason why he tied up Kaplan now was because he was afraid that Kaplan would go out of the bathhouse once he woke up. We haven't picked the mulberries yet. This is actually based on the Korean proverb, meet one's loved one as well as pick mulberries. It is an expression which means that two things can be achieved at the same time. An English equivalent would be to kill two birds with one stone. So what Jude meant is that they had met the loved one, the fairies, but not picked the mulberries yet. They haven't achieved their other purpose yet. Thanks to him, they met the wild fairies, but they had yet to reach the ruins of the Magic Kingdom. It was impossible for them to just let go of Kaplan, who would be a lot useful in the future. You're wicked as expected. Thank you for the compliment. Jude said and bowed as if he was in a play, and then used a pencil he found in Kaplan's luggage to write down in a piece of paper. It was full of aristocratic and posh words, but in the end, it could be summarized into one line as follows. We saved you, so don't be afraid and just wait, we'll be right back. Wouldn't he think that he was kidnapped? But we have no choice. Because they had to resolve the wild fairies problem first. Jude tied a new rope to the ankle of the tightly bound Kaplan, and then tied the other end of the rope to the bathhouse column. Okay, let's go now. But Jude, why are you so good in tying ropes? I learned it from the Boy Scouts. Jude tactfully dismissed her question and then approached the wild fairies, who were having an intense and heated conversation. When they saw Jude and Cordelia, they all squealed. Don't ask me what they talked about. Jude nodded at the words of Cordelia, who seemed to be exhausted already, and then asked the wild fairies. Would you take us to the Queen? Yes, let's go. The wild fairies flapped their wings and gathered around Jude and Cordelia, and afterwards, it was the same experience as before. When they closed and opened their eyes, they were standing in a completely different place. Oh, did we arrive here right away this time? It was not the living place where the ordinary fairies lived. They were in the Queen's residence. If the Fall Fairy Queen's abode was elegant, and the Winter Fairy Queen's home was refined, the Wild Fairy Queen's residence was overflowing with life. It's just random if you put it in a bad way. There were various kinds of flowers and trees that were randomly placed inside. But still, she was the Fairy Queen. The countless flowers and trees seemed to be in harmony of each other, so it didn't look disordered. Human children, nice to meet you. Jude and Cordelia looked at the place where the deep and profound voice that was different from the other fairies came. Seated in a large sunflower was the Fairy Queen with a lioness ears and tail. Jude Bayer greets the Wild Fairy Queen. Cordelia Chase greets the Wild Fairy Queen. A smile spread over the Fairy Queen's face when Jude and Cordelia courteously greeted her. With voluminous red hair and impressive fangs, she was wearing a short mini dress that was comfortable and looked easy to move in, unlike the other Fairy Queens who wore stylish dresses. But she was still a Fairy Queen. Instead of having a mischievous girl's face, her face was full of maturity and benevolence. You are not ordinary humans, you're very powerful, so children, I have a favor to ask of you, please solve our problem. It was a slightly different pattern than before. But it wasn't a bad pattern. The story might change a little depending on what their problem was, but it was much easier to sponge off them in this current situation. Your eyes look evil. Aren't yours the same too? Jude and Cordelia quickly exchanged glances before they looked back at the Fairy Queen almost at the same time, and the Fairy Queen spoke in a serious tone. Human children, a monster with an evil power appeared on the road connecting our wild fairies' residence and the High Elves' kingdom. Can you get rid of the monster and reopen the road? The fairies could cross time and space, but that did not mean they could freely jump over space anytime and anywhere. As the means to leap a long distance was limited, the physical road was also important, but a monster seemed to be blocking that road. Can you tell us what kind of monster it is? At Cordelia's question, the Fairy Queen chanted a short spell, then something like a video played in the minds of Jude and Cordelia. It had a bull's head and giant back wings, and its body was pitch black from head to toe. It was evidently Lacto, a lower-class demon species from hell. Just as I thought. It's understandable why the fairies are asking for help. Even though it was a lower-class species, Lacto was still a demon from hell. Even if it wasn't, for the fairies who rarely fought in battles, it was an opponent they had no way of defeating. Can you do it? When the Fairy Queen asked with a nervous face, Jude and Cordelia unhesitatingly nodded. We can do it. We'll try. Oh, thank you very much. The Fairy Queen was relieved, and Jude and Cordelia looked at each other before Jude spoke first. By the way, Fairy Queen. You can tell me. We need help too. Help? Yes, help. A smile deepened on Jude's face, and Cordelia's eyes slightly narrowed. Jude continued his words. Fairy Queen, may we ask you for the Earth protection? No problem, I will give you the protection. After the Fairy Queen generously spoke, Jude and Cordelia immediately held out the fairies' bonds. Thank you very much. My goodness, it's the fairies' bonds. I haven't seen it for a long time. The Fairy Queen innocently smiled and gave the earth protection. It was a protection that strengthened the overall physical ability and also granted its user a weak regenerative power. Are you ready now? Yes, we need the next help now. Okay, good, next help. Yes, next help. Jude instantly answered to the Fairy Queen, who blinked her eyes and then continued his words. Fairy Queen, we need weapons to fight the monster. Don't you already have weapons? The Fairy Queen's gaze quickly moved back and forth towards the Eastern Warrior's sword on Jude's waist and the moonlight that Cordelia was holding. However, Jude gave a firm answer again. This is not enough, because the opponent is a demon. He's right, we need a stronger weapon. Cordelia followed up even if he didn't ask her to. The Fairy Queen said after a moment's consideration. I don't know much about human weapons. So children, how about I show you the stuff left behind by the High Elves, and you can choose your own weapon from there. Thank you very much. We've been waiting for those words. It was an immediate answer again. At that moment, the Fairy Queen felt strange and hesitated for a while, but she soon crossed the space with Jude and Cordelia. You can open your eyes now. It was a stone building. It was very old and dilapidated everywhere, but its elegance could not be erased by the passage of time, as it remained in every corner of the place, such as in the pillars, walls, ceiling, floor, and so on. It was the architectural style of the High Elves, who were also known as the Ancient Elves. The spacious room looked to be around 10 meters in height and width. The ceiling was also quite high, and it seemed to be 7 meters high, and all the columns were attached to the wall, making the space itself look completely open. And the most important thing, various items were placed on the decorated cabinets located between the columns. Now that they had seen it, it really seemed to be a place where the High Elves stored their collected items, rather than an armory. Take your time, call me when you're done choosing. Having said that, the Fairy Queen instantly crossed the space and disappeared. So Jude and Cordelia were left in the end, with no one to notice their inner thoughts anymore, or rather, no one noticed how they had acted until now. The two became much more relaxed and spoke simultaneously. I'm left. I'm right. The division of labor began right away, and in the first display cabinet, Cordelia's breath halted. No way. Why did this item appear here? At the top section of the beautiful display cabinet was a golden brooch with a big red gem. As an item of the High Elves, Cordelia could feel its magical power, and she already knew the name of this brooch. Spell's Echo. Its effect was simple and powerful. It repeatedly cast the spell used by the caster. In other words, if Cordelia cast the Spear of Calamity, while wearing the spell's Echo, 2 Spears of Calamity would be cast. As a matter of course, it was an item that couldn't be abused, because the mana consumption was also doubled, but it was a huge advantage to be able to use 2 spells at the same time in an emergency. This is it, it's absolutely this. She didn't have to look at anything else. The thrilled Cordelia picked up the spell's Echo with trembling hands and carefully attached it to her chest. Jude, I've decided it's the spell's Echo. As she turned around and shouted loudly, Jude immediately responded. What, the spell's Echo? Cordelia felt a thrilling pleasure at seeing Jude's face in great shock. Yes, it's the spell's Echo. I choose this one. I don't even need to look at anything else. Because it was impossible that an item better than this would appear. Jude agreed. Among the items currently available at Cordelia's level, there were only 1 to 2 items that were better than the spell's Echo, even in the whole Legend of Heroes series. Depending on the user's disposition, the spell's Echo was even used as a graduation item. But Jude soon shook his head. What are you talking about? You have to keep looking. Yes, I'll look for something you can use. No, it's not that. You have to look for something you can use. I already chose spell's Echo. Are you going to take just that? Are you going to take only that? Cordelia blinked several times at Jude's words and soon realized what he meant. This was reality and not a game. Moreover, the Fairy Queen never said that they could only choose one item. As Allah. When Cordelia's eyes reflected her enlightenment, Jude smiled and said, "We'll need a lot of weapons to fight the demon." "Yes, because the opponent is a demon." "That's right, so let's fully arm ourselves to fight the demon." "Yes, yes, a full set from head to toe, full set. Cordelia cheerfully shouted and ran back to the display cabinet, and Jude pleasantly watched Cordelia before looking back at the cabinets. The earth protection and the high elves' armor. But that wasn't all. There were still some rewards left after they had defeated the monster. Fairies are so nice. With a blissful smile, Jude stepped towards the right cabinet. "Is that all that you needed?" "Yes, I need everything." Episode 79, Wild Black Cow 2. I made a mistake while posting the chapter yesterday. The first 2 paragraphs ended up being repeated, and 1 paragraph went missing. I've already corrected it, but for those who haven't seen the correction, here's the missing paragraph. "Is that all that you needed?" "Yes, I need everything." As Cordelia spoke with a big smile, the Wild Fairy Queen moved her head up and down again. She was glittering. She was really glittering. Cordelia's slender and long fingers were wearing numerous rings from her thumb to the ring finger, and even though she had a brooch on her chest, she was wearing another necklace. It didn't end there. Bracelets, belts, earrings. Despite wearing boots, she had ankle bracelets. How the heck is that girl wearing all that? Perhaps she was wearing something on the toes of her feet too. In addition to the glittering and shining ornaments of the brightly smiling Cordelia, she also had a tiara with blue jewels on top of her head that was together with the rabbit ears headband. Everything was colorful and sparkling. It was a terrible assortment of fashion accessories, and while Jude was admiring the beauty of Cordelia, who still looked pretty even in the midst of this, the Fairy Queen looked back at Jude with a miserable face. "You too?" "Yes, me too." Actually, Jude wasn't that much different from Cordelia. All his 10 fingers had rings, and he had different earrings on each ear. There were also necklaces on his neck, belts on his waist, and bracelets on his arms. In addition to the Eastern warrior's sword and the bicorn's horn dagger, there was also a beautiful elven sword on his waist. A new dagger was also attached to his thigh. And their clothing. Cordelia wore a gorgeous red cape on her back, while Jude wore a very large purple coat. All of the High Elves' legacies were magical items, whether they were strong or weak. It's sparkly. They're shining. Pretty handsome. While the fairies were thoughtlessly squealing, the Fairy Queen still had a dubious look on her face. Because there was no unity in their equipment. Unlike the fairies who were completely like kids, the Fairy Queen was an adult. In her eyes, it was very clear that the effects of the 2 rings, a ring that enhanced the flame attribute and a ring that enhanced the cold attribute, would cancel out each other. But they needed all that. We need it, we really need it. As Cordelia pressed her hands together to emphasize their necessity of it, Jude followed up in his mind. Not now, but later. In fact, there was nothing much remarkable if one assessed the items individually. As the Fairy Queen had seen, there were a lot of items whose effects cancelled each other out. But what's wrong with that? Let's just take it and see. If they had no use for it, they could just sell it. Take as much as you can when you have the opportunity to take as much as you can. It's better for them to let it sit around in their bags and not use it rather than leaving it and letting it be damaged by time. It's a justifiable mindset. Jude nodded at himself before he looked at Cordelia and the Fairy Queen again. It was questionable if Cordelia's persuasion worked well, but the Fairy Queen eventually nodded despite looking at them doubtfully. Okay, then let's go to where the monster is. Yes, Your Majesty. We will meet your expectations. Jude and Cordelia promptly responded, and the Fairy Queen had a gracious smile again as she was a little relieved. Close your eyes. Yes, Your Majesty. You're really good at answering, you're pretty too. Thank you for your kind words. When Cordelia closed her eyes and behaved politely again, the Fairy Queen's smile also deepened. You can open your eyes now. She was indeed the Fairy Queen. They didn't feel like they had moved at all, but when they opened their eyes, they were inside a huge cavity and not the forest of fairies. It was unknown if this was underground or above ground, but it seemed to be a huge cavity that was made by digging into the mountain or ground. I saw this in The Lord of the Rings. Jude nodded at Cordelia's gaze before he took a look around. There it is. There was a bridge between the precipice, and in the middle of that bridge, a giant demon was sitting in a crouched position. Lacto. If there was a tomb guardian in heaven, there was a Lacto in hell. Lacto's role was usually that of a gatekeeper, and it looked like its Minotaur cousin. It was a slow-witted demon, but it boasted a terrifying power. Can you defeat it? The worried Fairy Queen asked in low voice, and Cordelia immediately nodded her head. Certainly you can watch us. At her confident declaration, the faces of the fairies and the Fairy Queen brightened. Jude, since our opponent is Lacto, you know what to do, right? I know. Jude lightly loosened his wrists and swayed his head several times before he said again. I'm ready, what about you? I'm ready too. Cordelia clenched Moonlight as she took a deep breath before she stepped forward. And Lacto reacted to their movement. The demon, who was stiff and not moving as if it was a rock, opened its eyes in a flash and saw Jude and Cordelia approaching the bridge. It slowly spread out its wings as it stood up. Its weapons are a double-edged axe and a large shield. There's also a whip on the waist. Judging from its eyes, it looks like a low to mid-class Lacto. But it's still a demon. Yes, a demon. Even a common low-ranking demonic human was a ridiculous existence that can rip someone into shreds. Although there was tension in Jude and Cordelia's footsteps, they were not scared. When they finally arrived in front of the bridge, Kekek, I haven't tasted blood for a long time. An unpleasant voice that sounded like the scratching of iron came out of Lacto's mouth. The fairies, who were watching from behind, hugged each other in fear, but Jude and Cordelia were rather relieved. It's the lines of a small fry. Let's stick to the plan. Lacto was on the bridge. Jude started. He stomped hard on the ground and created a golden whirlwind. As his aura wrapped around his body, everyone, including Lacto, had no choice but to focus their gazes on Jude. Kekek, it looks like you want to fight. Lacto said, and Jude smiled. As Lacto took a step forward, it put down its axe and grabbed its whip. And at that very moment, Cordelia began to chant the spell. The fairies were surprised at the gathering of powerful mana and turned to Cordelia, and Lacto flinched before raising its shield. Spell's echo. She activated it. It echoed Cordelia's spell and created another magic spell. The mana surged. The whirlwinds rose. Lacto released a powerful aura all over its body. A purple aura gathered on the shield as it prepared to block whatever attack the two had in plan. And right after, when the Fairy Queen and everyone else held their breaths, Cordelia released the gathered mana with the moonlight. Instead of rushing towards Lacto, it struck the ground. Barang! The bridge shook, a black energy spread all over the bridge, and the magic that she had already invoked was repeated by the spell's echo again. Boodawam! A crack formed, numerous lines spread all over the bridge, as if the whole bridge was covered by a spider web. And Jude used his skill. When the black dragon's energy was released towards the ground, black energy soared between the cracks. Hey! The Fairy Queen said, and Lacto looked under his feet. Cordelia smiled and waved her hand. Goodbye. It crashed. The cracked bridge literally fell and crashed, and Lacto, who was on top of it, also plummeted. They heard a succession of screams. Cordelia nodded with a satisfied face, and Jude turned towards the Fairy Queen. We defeated it. They did do it. Lacto. And the bridge. The bridge is gone. The Fairy Queen cried as she flew towards Jude and Cordelia. She asked them to get rid of the monster blocking the road, but not the bridge itself. When the Fairy Queen, who was brimming with emotion, tried to shout again, Jude hurriedly raised his hand to stop her. No, it's okay. What the hell do you mean it's okay? The bridge was gone. As the Fairy Queen unconsciously held the back of her neck, Cordelia said. But fairies have wings. What? You have wings, so you can just fly. Lacto, who was obstructing the road, disappeared. The bridge was also gone, but the fairies could fly in the first place, so the bridge was not necessary. Isn't that right? The fairy queen felt dizzy at her rather logical words, and Jude said with a smile. Fairy queen, I apologize, but could you step back for a while? I should step back. Because it's not yet over. The last one was said by Cordelia. She looked back at Jude and began to count downwards, and Jude also joined Cordelia. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The two shouted at the same time, and at that moment, a roar filled the air. It was Lacto. With its bat wings stretched out, Lacto flew up and angrily roared as it saw Jude and Cordelia, who had already activated the magic she had prepared in advance. Wind Cutter. The spell's echo repeated her spell again. A sharp wind blade flew towards the target. With a high-pitched sound, it hit and injured Lacto's wings. Goodbye again. Holy Cross Punch. Jude drove the Holy Cross Punch towards Lacto. Because it got hit by the golden cross and its flapping wings were no longer moving properly, Lacto lost its balance at once and plummeted once again. Guara. Boom. Jude and Cordelia looked back at the fairy queen, and the fairy queen blinked her eyes and opened her lips with difficulty. Let's finish our conversation. Since fairies have wings, they won't suffer any inconveniences in using this road even if there's no bridge. But think about it, now that there's no bridge, there won't be any monsters like Lacto who will block the bridge. If bees gathered in the flower garden, then they should destroy the flower garden itself to get rid of the bees. It was pure nonsense, but the ones who were listening to him was the fairies. Wow, you're right. How clever. Without a bridge, there won't be any more monsters. As the fairies rejoiced, Cordelia smiled and glanced at the fairy queen, and Jude said again with a smile. This is all thanks to you, your majesty. Thanks to generously giving out such valuable equipment, we were able to destroy the bridge, which was the main cause of everything. He's right, this is all thanks to the fairy queen. Let's give a round of applause for the fairy queen. Woo-oh. Jude spoke and Cordelia incited the fairies to do something absurd. The fairies were joyous in nature, so when Cordelia began to clap, they also began clapping. Long live the queen! Hooray! Hooray! They managed to convince them. In the end, the fairy queen had no choice but to awkwardly smile. Yes, you did well. Wow, our queen is the best. Hurrah for the queen. The queen is so pretty. The last one was Cordelia. Cordelia knew the fairies quite well since she had been harassed by them in the past. Ahem. The fairy queen was still a fairy after all. She blushed with delight at the words saying that she was pretty, and Jude and Cordelia looked at each other. You think it's okay now? Yes, all we have to do is finish our job. The true end goal for this job. But before that, there was still one more work left to do. Your Majesty, please step back for a while again. At Cordelia's words, the fairy queen tilted her head, but she soon retreated, and Jude and Cordelia exchanged glances as they started counting down again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The bloody Lacto stuck out its head. Since it had been injured from its fall, its right horn was broken, and blood bled from its head. Rage, hatred, anger. The angry monster had crept up the precipice and tried to leap at them at that moment. But it was too late. Jude was standing on top of a magical hand, and the two were already in position. It's goodbye at this point. Bye. Jude strongly stepped on the hand that was supporting him, and Cordelia pushed him away with a magical force. With a grievous scream, Lacto crashed down once again. It tried to hurl curses at the wickedly smiling Jude and Cordelia at the top of the precipice, but the speed of the fall was too fast for it to do that. And it crashed again. O's level up. We defeated it. Having seen the pure white rings that surrounded them, Jude and Cordelia smiled in satisfaction before they looked back at the Fairy Queen. We defeated it. You can relax now. Why, yes. The Fairy Queen unconsciously stuttered and then composed herself with deep breaths. Since the monster was gone, their problem was solved. But why? Why do I still have a bad feeling? The answer came before her eyes. Your Majesty. Yes. Please hand out the final reward. Reward? What reward? A good reward. Shouldn't there be a reward since they settled the request? Jude and Cordelia stepped forward as the dupe, no, the head of the wild fairies, instinctively stepped backwards. You're like a demon. Do you hate it then? No, I love it. Episode 80, The Kaplan Effect 1. Terms used in this chapter. Praise makes even a whale dance, an old Korean saying which means that praises makes a person feel good. Magician of words, also known as wordsmith, which means a person who is an expert in the use of words. Jude also had something called a conscience. Really? Why are you pretending like it's someone else's business? You're an accomplice too. Cordelia doesn't know anything, I was just following Daddy. Cordelia pretended to be cute and innocent in front of him, and Jude couldn't win against her. Hee, I'm really cute, so you couldn't win, right? No, it's not. Hey, so. Cordelia cheekily laughed and lightly knocked on Jude's chest. Apparently, you have a conscience here too. Jude's conscience. As she had said, Jude also had a conscience. Even for Jude, it was unreasonable to extort more from the Fairy Queen as a reward for her single request when they had already received the Earth Protection and over 20 magic tools. Though the truth is, we have nothing else to extort from her. There surely would have been more treasures, but it was questionable if the Fairy Queen would hand it over to them. There was no need to destroy a good relationship just because of greed. That's why you got this. It's enough. Jude replied with a smile before spreading out the map he received from the Fairy Queen. Magellan, the Kingdom of Magic. It was a powerful magic kingdom built by the High Elves, who were also known as the Ancient Elves. The map displayed and recorded in detail the geography of not only the Raptor Canyon, but also of Endymion, the capital of the former Magic Kingdom. Lena must be here somewhere, right? Perhaps, even if she isn't here, we still have to know about Endymion in order to save Lena. After nodding at Jude's words, Cordelia turned her gaze towards the left corner of the map and smiled. This is the hot spring we're in now, and since this is the bathhouse sign, there are more than 10 bathhouses in Endymion alone. Although it would not have been completely preserved like the bathhouse they were in that was managed by the wild fairies, the fact that there were bathhouses was still important. Good for you. Yes, I love it. Seeing Cordelia's broad smile, Jude's mood also became better. Let's stop by these places on the way. Anyway, we gained a lot from today's meeting. Yes, you're right. They got the map of Endymion, the Earth Protection, and several magic items, which included the spell's echo. There's even information. Information such as what monsters lived in Raptor Canyon, and which surrounding terrain and so on, that they should be careful of. Jude and Cordelia got more than they had thought. Let's change our equipment setting first, minus the items that has effects that cancel out each other. Let's set it at the highest efficiency. Leave it to me, I'll set up yours at the highest efficiency. Cordelia lightly knocked on her chest and began sorting out the equipment they had brought, and Jude approached the fainted Kaplan, who was still lying on the floor. How's Kaplan? He looks fine, he's just sleeping well. After answering Cordelia, Jude checked Kaplan's pulse before he untied the ropes. Indiana Kaplan. An adventurer and archaeologist from the Argon Empire. He was a character the player could meet at least once when they explored the ruins in the Argon Empire. He was always involved in accidents, so beginners would call him the god of disaster, while Rotten Waters called him the god of bliss. Are you going to wake him up? Yes, because we have a lot to talk about. He wanted to know why Kaplan came to the wild land, and what and how much Kaplan knew about Endymion. Wait, if you're going to wake him up, I'll wake him up with magic. Cordelia put the sorted equipment into their newly brought magic bag before she quickly walked towards Jude. Awake! As she gently stroked Kaplan's shiny head and whispered, the spell's effect was activated. Ooh la! Kaplan opened his eyes with a groan and was half asleep for a moment, but he soon jumped up and raised his upper body. Hugh, where am I? What about the monster? Jude and Cordelia left him alone for now as Kaplan exhaled roughly and looked around him before he stabilized his position. Bathhouse, high elf style. As expected of an archaeologist. Jude unknowingly smiled and then said to Kaplan, who was covered in cold sweat, "You're Sir Indiana Kaplan, am I right?" Kaplan flinched at the sudden call, but he soon nodded. He was too busy to look around, so he didn't properly notice Jude and Cordelia standing next to him. "I'm Indiana Kaplan, here Enno, I remember, while being chased by the white giant bear." "Yes, we saved Sir Kaplan." "We saved you. If not for us, you would have been eaten by the white giant bear." Cordelia emphasized the fact that they saved him, even if Jude didn't ask her to. "Why? No, I'm just proud. She grew up well." But he partly felt awful when he thought that he had corrupted an innocent child. In any case, Cordelia's emphasis on doing him a favor worked. "Oh, you two were my benefactors, thank you very much, I lived thanks to you too." "Yes, that's right." Ahem, now then." Cordelia immediately nodded, but Jude stealthily stopped Cordelia as he stepped forward. Because Kaplan wasn't a fairy. Emphasizing that he owed them was good, but if it was too obvious, there was a possibility that it would be slightly counterproductive. "It's an honor to meet Sir Indiana Kaplan, a renowned archaeologist." "Ho, it's just a bit of an empty name." Kaplan stroked his beard as if he was embarrassed, but praise makes even a whale dance. Kaplan felt much better. "I am Jude, and this is my fiancée, Cordelia." "I'm Cordelia, it's an honor to meet you." Cordelia's courteousness made Kaplan's face flushed. "Your fiancée is a very beautiful woman, I'm envious." "Ha, thank you." In fact, Cordelia didn't notice because she didn't pay it much thought, but Jude had always stressed the fact that she was his fiancée whenever they met someone. In the midst of the friendly atmosphere, Kaplan spoke. "By the way, you don't look like people who live in the wild land." "Yes, we are from the S-Len Kingdom." "Ho, S-Len, the S-Len Kingdom has long been in war with the barbarians, so how come you're here?" "There were various circumstances, but the biggest reason is to explore the ruins." "Explore the ruins?" "Yes, explore the ruins." At the same time as he laughed, ho, at Jude's answer, Kaplan's face was filled with curiosity and nervousness. "The ruins you're talking about are the capital of Magellan, the Magic Kingdom, the Endymion capital." "Oh, you're the same." With bright eyes, Kaplan stood up from his position, and Cordelia immediately continued. "Sir Kaplan, are you here to investigate Endymion?" "That's right, I was a little lost because I didn't know the exact location, but seeing you two gave me hope." "Endymion must be somewhere around here." "Yes, Endymion is real, and if you look at this place on a bigger scale, this is also a part of Endymion." "Oh, as expected, is this the bathhouse of the High Elves?" "Yes, that's right." "Woo-ah!" Kaplan was extremely excited as he immediately ran to the wall and began looking and carefully touching the murals, engraved characters, decorations, and so on, that decorated the bathhouse. He's completely excited. Because he's an archaeologist. Jude didn't want to appear rude, but they still had to finish their conversation with him. So he approached Kaplan and spoke. "I and Cordelia are researchers at the academy located in the capital of the S-Len Kingdom. By chance, we got a map of Raptor Canyon and Endymion, so we ended up coming here." "Maps, you mean a map?" "Yes, a map." Kaplan immediately rushed towards Jude, who took out a neatly folded map. However, Jude didn't give out the map. "Before that, Sir Kaplan, there's something we'd like to know." "What do you want to know?" "It's not a big deal, we just want to exchange information." They wanted to know what Kaplan knew about Endymion. But the reason Kaplan came all the way to the wild land was because he wanted to just see Endymion. As you two know, Magellan, the kingdom of magic, is a legend. It's not that there are no records at all, but information about the kingdom is lacking to the point that its existence is even questioned. That was correct. Even Jude and Cordelia did not know of the existence of the magic kingdom itself until they had heard of it from gentle Snow Breeze. Because the kingdom's existence itself is being questioned, the cause of its destruction was also handed down through legends. A long time ago, the overlords of hell descended onto this world in an era called the Ancient Times. According to legend, Angelone, the last queen of the magic kingdom, gathered all the forces of the kingdom to confront the overlord of hell, but in the end, they were outnumbered. The magic kingdom eventually fell into the hands of demons and collapsed. But they weren't just trampled. Magellan's high elves succeeded in inflicting a fatal injury to the overlord of hell. Moreover, it is said that the war between Magellan and the overlord of hell did not happen for a day or two. At least a year. No, during the war that lasted for many years, Magellan's wizards researched and studied ways on how to fight the demons. It was a convincing tale. It became apparent that the reason Lena came here was to obtain the demon countermeasures that was developed by Magellan's high elves. After the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom, demon followers began to run wild in the Argon Empire. More and more people are concerned about the arrival of a powerful demon. Then, yes, it is to find a way to fight against the demons, not only for the Argon Empire, but also for the whole world. As a scholar, there are also many reasons to move. Of course, there were requests from sponsors too. Despite looking like an old dwarf, him clearing his throat at the end was strangely cute. I see, in fact, we are here for a similar reason. The Devil's Hand and other demon followers have been running wild in the Len Kingdom for a long time too. As expected, demon followers are a worldwide problem. It's not just one country's problem. Yes, so Sir Kaplan, let's explore Endymion together. Let's leave our position as citizens of the Len Kingdom and of the Argon Empire, and even transcend our human and dwarf races, and just be people who live together in this era. Ooh, that's good, let us do so. As Kaplan nodded and shook the hand that Jude had stretched out, Jude glanced at Cordelia and she gave a thumbs up. As expected of my scammer. They call me a magician of words. After his eye conversation with Cordelia, Jude opened the map, showed it to Kaplan and then said, Sir Kaplan, we're going to take a break here today and start exploring tomorrow. So Sir Kaplan, let's have a good rest today. I understand. Could I see a little more of the map? Of course, take your time. Jude plainly handed over the map to the overly excited Kaplan before he drew closer to Cordelia again and said, Let's take a rest now. I have to take a bath and do the laundry. Wash yourself a little too, you're sweaty. Really? Yes, really, so don't stick close to me until you've washed yourself. Do you understand? Cordelia coyly said before she turned around and headed towards the bathtub in the corner, and Jude sniffed and smelled himself before hurriedly heading over to the opposite side of the bathtub. And the next morning, are we going like this? Yes, we're going like this. We're going like this. At the hot springs entrance, Jude and Cordelia were close together, while Kaplan stood far away. Was it almost 30 meters apart? Moreover, they weren't just far away. A rope was tied around Kaplan's barrel-like waist, and Jude held the other end of that rope. Don't worry, if anything happens, we'll save you like yesterday. It'll be fine since we're connected with the rope like this. No, it's just. Kaplan took the lead, while Jude and Cordelia followed him. But since he was tied up with a rope like that, it felt like he was a bait that was hanging from a fishing rod. Let's go. Let's depart. At the urging of Jude and Cordelia, Kaplan had a baffled expression, but he soon nodded. At any rate, the two were his benefactors, and they even gave him the map and let him take the lead. The value of the map, in which Endymion's geography was described in detail, was surely around 1,000 gold, so Kaplan himself didn't feel like he was a bait. They must have a different idea. The two were good enough fighters to save themselves from the white giant bear. There must be a reason why they were following at a distance. Kaplan tried to convince himself before he looked straight ahead with sparkling eyes. The Endymion capital. The capital of the fallen kingdom of magic. The last city. These were words that stimulated his heart as an adventurer and archaeologist. Let's go. Kaplan proudly advanced, and Jude and Cordelia followed Kaplan at a distance of 30 meters. 1 hour passed like that. Cordelia raised her head, and Jude spontaneously smiled. Ah, it's a monster. Ooh, oh, it's an ice grizzly, a rare monster. It's also named, it has 2 horns, as expected of the Kaplan effect. While Kaplan screamed and ran away, the two widely smiled and then pulled the rope hard to retrieve Kaplan before they stepped forward. It was a named monster fishing using Kaplan, an unlucky man who attracts misfortune. With this method, they would be able to encounter rare monsters that were normally difficult to encounter. In addition, they would be able to encounter named monsters that were even harder to encounter. This was called the Kaplan effect. My princess, shall we catch a big fish? Yes, Daddy, let's pick the mulberries. The 2 rotten waters smiled broadly at each other before they moved forward, and the named monster, who sensed the unusual atmosphere, shuddered at that moment, but it was already too late. Jude and Cordelia. The exciting fishing of the 2 rotten waters began.